Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Advocacy Day Briefing webinar. I am Jeremy Johannesson, Executive Director of the New York Library Association, and I am pleased to be joined by Rebecca Smith-Aldrich with the Mid-Hudson Library System, and she's the Coordinator for Library Sustainability. We are very excited to be here with you all today, and thank you for making the time to participate and get this information that will help you as you participate in library advocacy during this session. So good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We know you're great advocates because you're taking the time this morning to listen to us live here. So we really appreciate that you're joining us because now is really the time to speak up for library aid. We've got around until, I'd say, about April 1st, although Jeremy is going to explain some extenuating circumstances around that date a little later, to influence legislators and the governor to avoid what is essentially a cut, which flat funding proposed by the governor. We've got to turn that around. So our goal here today is to increase your confidence and your comfort related to delivering the advocacy messages that we're so lucky to have NYLA to have crafted for us. We want to tell you a little more about the why behind the what when you look at the talking points on the NYLA website. So to get started here today, we just wanted to remind you that our voices are much stronger when we speak together. And we're so lucky to have NYLA, which is, as you know, the voice of the library community, to organize and amplify our efforts. Because when we're all on the same page saying the same thing at the right time to the right people, our message is going to have a much bigger impact. So again, in order to understand what those messages are and what's behind them, we want to make sure you have the insider information so your messages come out clear and strong when you're not only at Advocacy Day next Wednesday, February 25th, but while you're speaking to legislators in person, on the phone, and online. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we just wanted to remind you how critical libraries are and some of the really important talking points about libraries in general. When you get that lovely person that comes up to you and questions the validity or viability of libraries in the future, you always got to have those zingers to come back with. And luckily, NYLA commissioned a recent poll by Siena, so we've got some new, fresh data to be using, one of which is that there's a 10% increase in the usage in libraries, and that's a great statewide piece of information for us all to be sharing. And of course, you're going to want to be brushing up on your talking points about access and equality, two of the major selling points of why public libraries are essential to New Yorkers. We're talking about our primary role in providing early literacy support, digital literacy support, for public libraries being the #1 point of internet access for those that don't have internet at home. Jeremy shared a cool fact with me yesterday that I didn't know. He said that 70%, that's 70% of communities in New York were the only free access to the internet in that community. That's a massive point to be making when we're talking to legislators, particularly because access to broadband connectivity is a huge talking point of the governors right now. So it's a nice way to frame our message in a way that matters to the people at the top in the government in Albany. So this is an interesting list, and some of you may have seen this and some of you may have not. When you see the talking points about how much money we're talking about when it comes to state aid for libraries, and you see the number 86.6 million, which is a pretty massive number in most of our lives, what you might not realize is that there's actually many components to where that aid is spent. For the public library people on the line, you're probably most familiar, obviously, with your system support, the local library services aid, which for those of you that don't know, that's 31 cents per capita or $1,500 under formula, whichever is more. Of course, we're not at formula funding now, so that's a little less cash in your hand at the local level. Public libraries are also really familiar with the state aid for public library construction, and we're really pleased to report the governor put the full $14 million in his proposed budget for construction, which is a great sign. Of course, we're going to start advocating for more because that number has been static for an awfully long time, and there's a lot more need than $14 million a year for public library construction. And of course, the summer reading program, our great opportunity to partner across all types of libraries during the summer, is another way you might really see live on the local level how state money is used. But look at this huge list of how this money is used to leverage access for all New Yorkers. This is an important point to understand that this is all types of libraries are impacted by our advocacy efforts. So this is one of our favorite numbers, 7 to 1, right? We're such a great return on investment. Every time the state puts in at least $1, for every dollar the state puts in to library aid, we're churning out $7 worth of services to our community, to our constituents. That's an awesome return on investment. The New York Library Association has also calculated the number of $1 billion in savings to the people that use our libraries, just from the collections that they borrow in our libraries. That's how much they're saving, $1 billion a year. So when we talk about the economic viability of our communities, we're contributing in many, many ways. And this is a really important statistic to drive home, because the word efficiency is a huge selling point in Albany. It has been for a number of years, particularly since Andrew Cuomo was Attorney General, and he's carried that into his governorship as well. So talking about the efficiency, the scale, the economy of scale that we provide by working together through the system networks is another very important talking point to be bringing home, along with our specific 2015 advocacy messages.
This is one of my favorite numbers to throw around. It's the 0.1% number, and I have spent more time than I care to think about trying to graphically represent that. But when you make a pie chart and you try and do 1%, it looks like a sliver, and trying to represent 0.1% ends up with a line that is not able to be rendered. So it's a challengingly small number, and what that number represents is the portion of library aid as it relates to the overall New York State budget. And even at, if by some miracle we were to suddenly jump from where we are at 86.6 million to full funding at 102.6, we would still not move that number. We would still remain at 0.1% of the budget. It's how small a piece of the operation that library aid represents. And as Rebecca mentioned, we're leveraging a tremendous return on that money in the 7 to 1 return. This slide, I give full credit to Rebecca for pulling this great graphic, and as I was reviewing the slides, it definitely stood out as a great way to think about what flat funding means. It's not as easy to rally the troops, as it were, when the governor proposed flat funding for libraries last year. When the governor removed the previous year's legislative ad, which resulted in a $4 million cut, the community was outraged, and we saw a surge in participation in people writing to their elected officials in opposition to that cut. And it's a little more challenging to get people fired up and outraged by flat funding, but flat funding is a flat line. And it does not keep pace with our needs, and it doesn't keep pace with inflation, and it certainly doesn't keep pace with what's already mandated in education law for $102.6 million. This chart has been around for a few years, so I hope that you're all familiar with this. It's been updated with the most current numbers. And what it reflects are, well, there's 3 different trend lines there. The blue line showing you that runs up the middle what is stipulated in education law for library aid funding, and the 102.4 is on there. And the red line is showing what we've actually had provided in the state budget. So you can see the high water mark with a one-time bump there to 102.8 in 2007, and that low point of 79 in 2011-12. So it's been volatile for library aid, and we're making our way back up into the right direction. And then the most sobering number, just going back to the 1998 number of 88.5 million, which was full funding under the education law at that point. If you just apply standard inflation rates on that number from 1998 till now, you'll see that to just be able to purchase the same amount that we were able to purchase with that 88.5 in 1998, today's number would have to be 128 million. So as much as we really need to get to full funding, we're still able to purchase less now than we were in 1998.
So as you can see, we've definitely got some work to do, but I know we can do it because we've been getting some excellent traction over the past few years. As the recession has been turned around and we've been seeing some economic growth here in New York, libraries did start to equalize, to stabilize with the funding that we were receiving. Even though we had some hard-fought battles there when the governor would propose last year's funding to be carried through to this year without increases, the legislature really stepped up in a number of ways to help us out, and they seem to be poised again to help us get beyond flat funding and get closer to where we should be in terms of legislated funding. So as Jeremy has said a number of times now, our current goal is full funding for library aid. And for the first time in a long time, that's actually an achievable goal. We're not too many years away from that if we can start getting regular increases to library aid. So this is one of the big challenges of the New York Library Association, is to come up with a message that works for everybody. And this really credit goes to Jeremy and the staff at NYLA, Mike Nepple, and the New York Library Association's Legislative Committee, who actually puts in a lot of unseen and unheralded work behind the scenes to get ready for next week's Advocacy Day and the entire legislative season each year. And this is the message we've really simplified and find very concisely appropriate for what we're trying to achieve this year, that libraries are education. It's very clear that we're part of the education infrastructure, and every community that we're serving, regardless of our type of library, we are education. We're chartered by the state education department, we're overseen by the state education department, and we need to be treated like education aid in the budget as we move forward. When the governor proposes a 4.8% increase to education aid but flat funding to libraries, that means there's a major disconnect that we have to work to turn around and start matching education aid. So full funding is our goal, and we want to get into a pattern of having the governor and the legislature match the proposed increase for education aid for library aid as well. So we talked before about the new Siena Poll that NYLA commissioned, so we had fresh data to work forward with, which is absolutely fantastic. It really reflected, it's, you know, when you always get the survey results and you're hoping they say what you want them to say, and this was definitely the case with the new Siena Poll that came out in January through NYLA. The full results are available on NYLA's website. We really wanted to point out this statistic, that 94% of respondents in this poll said that public libraries are important to our state's education infrastructure. And really our legislators need to be hearing this. We need to connect the legislators with their constituents' opinions. That's part of our work as advocates, to really help them understand that their constituents, the people that elected them, that they represent, believe that libraries are education and that their funding should be reflected as such, that we should not be treated differently in the budget than education aid. We should be matched, we should be fully funded, and that match should continue once we're fully funded. So Jeremy, those full talking points, right, they're on NYLA.org, the homepage?
They are under the Advocacy tab and the Legislative Priorities. The full Siena Poll is available under the Headlines section on NYLA.org.
Jeremy's also integrated those talking points into the appropriate areas of the Budget Priority handout and the Legislative Priority handout that you find at NYLA.org on the homepage. So just to review, these are our two budgetary priorities. We want full funding for libraries at $102 million. That's the legislated level that library aid should be at and has not been at, which is actually a true crime. My coworker, Mary Beth Advocate, who's the assistant director here at Mid-Hudson, that is really her last name, Advocate, she consistently says we should be making citizens arrests of legislators for not fully funding libraries because they're breaking the law. But the truth is the budget each year is a new law that trumps that law. So our work is each year to get into the current budget year's bill that we are fully funded. And that's the work we're faced with this year, is to ask for full funding and to get into a pattern of matching the education increase, which this year is 4.8%. So Jeremy, I'd like to ask you to fill in everyone on some of the insider stuff that's been going on up in Albany. Everyone, I'm sure a lot of people have heard that Sheldon Silver stepped down as the Speaker of the Assembly. What people might not realize is the kind of effect that's having on the timeline for the budget this year.
Absolutely, and this legislative session is off to a rocky start, to put it lightly. The session calendar comes out, and there's 67 days, if my count is right, of actual legislative session days during this year, starting on January 7th and theoretically wrapping up on June 17th. The target for the completion of the New York State budget is for it to be adopted on or before Wednesday, April 1st. That is built around a careful, choreographed negotiation process that begins with the State of the State in the beginning of January, and then the governor's budget presentation later in January. What happened this year is that some of you are aware, former governor Mario Cuomo passed away in the beginning of January, so the State of the State was pushed back by 2 weeks. And then current governor Andrew Cuomo combined his State of the State with his budget presentation for the first time in recent history, possibly ever, which therefore left the process on hold. So they lost the better part of January. No sooner did this newly combined State of the State and budget presentation happen, but within 24 hours of that, the Assembly Speaker of 20-plus years, Sheldon Silver, was arrested, and the fallout from that ended in his stepping down, which carried into 2 weeks of essential chaos and inaction by the legislature. And so when we typically expect to see things like committee appointments done by the second week in January, they just came out in the beginning of February. So the legislature is already far behind the 8 ball in their regular process. Legislative budget hearings did take place according to schedule, and NYLA did testify before the joint education hearing, and that testimony is also available on the NYLA site if you want to take a look. The video is posted of Mike Nepple testifying there. But the process and the chances of the budget completing its negotiation and being adopted by April 1st are well, they're below 50%, I would say, at best. And I'm sure if you check the odds makers, the odds are against it being on time. So this doesn't necessarily negatively impact libraries, but it certainly doesn't help. I am a fan of an on-time budget. The sooner things get done and they're settled, the less opportunity there are for things to go awry. And a perfect example is last year when the Senate's one-house budget bill included an $8 million increase for libraries, which was in the spreadsheets and in the works until about 4 hours before the final version was completed, and we were dinged, and $3 million evaporated, and we theorized was allocated to the Universal Pre-K program. So we'd like to see the single house numbers come out and get them settled and in place sooner than later. So we'll be watching and hoping that the budget is done as soon as it can be.
So the other timing issue we're keeping our eye on is the legislative priority side of things. You'll notice on the New York Library's website, nyla.org, you can download the budgetary priorities, which we've covered in the first portion of this webinar. And you'll see the second page of that is the legislative priorities. And normally while we are talking about these the whole time that we're advocating at the state level, the real work of the legislative priorities doesn't usually pick up speed until after the budget is passed. So as you could see in that calendar that Jeremy was just describing, we've now got an unpredictable calendar for when the budget will pass and when our advocacy efforts are going to transition to the legislative priority side of our legislative agenda this year. However, it's not too soon to get informed about what the legislative priorities are and how they impact things in terms of how we're advocating at the budgetary level. At least one of the bills we're going to talk about today is something we're actually targeting to get into the budget bill. So it is timely to be talking about some of these things when we're up in Albany next Wednesday. So we wanted to give you a briefing on all the legislative priorities the New York Library Association's Legislative Committee has identified so far. So first we've got the MTA Payroll Tax Exemption, and I know a lot of people in the state kind of tune out when we talk about this because they think it only affects certain counties, those closer to the MTA service area. Just to give you a list of who those are, that's Dutchess County, Orange County, Putnam, Rockland, Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk counties, as well as the 5 boroughs of New York City. Schools and private schools are exempt from paying this tax. However, libraries are not. They actually have kind of a strange thing going on. Libraries are paying this tax, and then the government is budgeting $1.3 million to reimburse us for paying that tax, which seems awfully inefficient. It takes money out of our budget and our cash flow for an undetermined amount of time until we're reimbursed. The government has to process those reimbursements, and we're thinking this just doesn't make sense on a lot of levels. We think, again, libraries are education. We should be treated as schools are, and we should be exempt just like schools and private schools are. And also, let's save the government some time from having to do those reimbursements by just exempting us right up front. So the goal is for this to actually be enclosed into the budget bill, because currently the governor has proposed, again, that $1.3 million to reimburse us, where we'd prefer to have language in the budget bill that actually just exempts us from that. And Jeremy, my understanding is we were pretty close to getting this last year, so we've got a good shot at it this year. Is that correct?
That is correct. Last year the exemption appeared in, if you think of the bill as an outline, we were in the heading. The permanent exemption appeared in the proper category heading, but when you got down into the actual body of the bill, it had been removed from that spot. So it was in at one point and was in late enough that in the final edit someone missed removing it from the header language. So we were that close, and because of the fiscal impact of this, it is best accomplished in the budget, and we're hopeful that this is the year to get it done once and for all.
But the NYLA Legislative Committee has a plan B. In case we get excised from the budget bill again, we've got a standalone bill that you'll see in the legislative priorities that we can be asking legislators to sign on to should we not be successful in getting this into the budget bill. This is something that's pretty important and really drives home our message about libraries being education, that we should be treated the same way as schools. And so that's why it's important to the entire library community, not just the libraries in the county cited under the MTA payroll tax.
The next item on the legislative agenda is it's a new bill that will require a librarian in schools K through 12. This is an issue that has been around, and NYLA has been working towards for many years. The most recent version was on the legislative agenda back in 2007, and it took a little hiatus when we were, if you remember from our graph, 2008, when we had some of the lowest funding years, we moved all of our attention just to improving the funding conditions. But now that we're moving in the right direction with funding, we're ready to tackle school librarians again. So we have a fresh bill that we expect will be introduced shortly by Senator Farley with new language changed from what we had in the 2007 version. And the important issues here are that currently there is no regulation for a school librarian in grades K through 6. There is in grades 7 through 12. But an important thing to understand is that what is currently the case is that the high school requirement is a commissioner's regulation. It is not an education law. And that what seems like a slight difference is what allows a number of schools to ignore that regulation with no impact on their funding and no recourse from the state. It's a regulation, not an education law. So our bill seeks to change that. It would increase the requirement, extending it down from grade 7 all the way down to kindergarten, so that all students K-12 would have access to a school library staffed by a certified school librarian, and it would move this requirement out of commissioner's regulations and codify it in education law. This has it would protect those in these roles and would allow for the enforcement of this law to be far more enforceable. So.
So for libraries of all types, this is another call to you to be speaking up on behalf of school libraries as well. We all understand how school librarians are so important to our children's education. You can see such great talking points from the American Association of School Librarians. They've done so much of the heavy lifting for us to come up with our advocacy talking points. You'll also see some good talking points in the Legislative Priorities sheet at NYLA.org that has a great statistic from Syracuse University in a study they had done that revealed that students with access to school libraries staffed by a certified school library and media specialist consistently score 15 to 20% higher in English language arts tests by the 4th grade. So we can show true impact when school librarians are part of the education infrastructure, and it really should be something that's standard throughout New York. So I encourage everybody to speak up on behalf of school libraries. They certainly have no trouble speaking up for themselves, so let's boost that message for them and help them carry it out.
This next item on our legislative agenda we refer to as TAPER. It's taxpayer access to publicly funded research. And many of you are familiar with this bill as it has been around on our agenda for a few years now. In years past, it was included on our legislative agenda in partnership with the New York State Higher Education Initiative, NYSHI, which was a separate advocacy group working specifically for both academic and research libraries. And that group has since dissolved, but we continue to see the value in this issue and continue to advocate for it. Very late in the last legislative session, days before the end of session, an amendment was made to the bill that would move it in direct parity with the national and federal model. That requires that any research facility that accepts dollars from the National Institute of Health, the NIH, make any materials that are published in a peer-reviewed journal available to the NIH for posting to an online repository. And that national level model includes a 1-year embargo that they will not appear for free online for that first year, and that allows for those that need immediate access to that information to still get it and purchase it through online databases such as Elsevier. By removing the previous version called for only a 6-month embargo. So by extending the embargo out to match the federal model, we believe that we have removed really the only argument that the opposition to this bill had. And as the sticker says, it seems very much like common sense. The largest state funder of research is the New York State Department of Health, in parity to the national. And when they provide funding to a college or university to do research, that same institution can then be forced to purchase access to an online database to make the research that's been published available to their colleagues. So it's state dollars being used to purchase access to research that was funded by state dollars. So we're hoping that we can move past that, and there's certainly interest in making this available, and it would be beneficial to not just academic libraries that would save them on some of their database subscriptions, but really to all libraries that would also then have a higher level access to some high level research that's taking place.
The next issue we'd like to speak to you about, you won't actually find on the NYLA legislative priorities just yet. This is a developing issue that we wanted to bring you up to speed on. It's something that some of you may have heard about, some of you may have not, but it behooves us all to understand the impact of what's going on surrounding the governor's veto of a local bill very late in session last year. Some might even say in the 11th hour this happened. As we said, it was an unprecedented move by Governor Cuomo. He exercised his veto authority on a local bill that sought to authorize the voters of the town of Rhinebeck to create the Star Public Library District. For those of you not familiar, special library districts are recommended by the Regents Advisory Council on Libraries, by the New York Library Association, and pretty much everyone in the public library community who understands how critical it is for libraries to have a sustainable funding path. This is a very common method that libraries use to have public votes on their budget. So putting the power into the hands of the public to decide how much to tax themselves for library services, and also to elect the boards that oversee the funds that are given to the library to provide quality library service in our communities. The governor has signed 2 bills, possibly 3 or more, into existence during his tenure. So this veto felt like it came out of nowhere and really knocked us all back for a loop, I think. So what we're doing right now is working on what's going on and how do we turn this around. Because for the public library community, having the option of special districts is very critical to the sustainable funding future of many libraries in the state. It helps to correct areas that are unserved or double taxed. Again, it helps put power to the hands of the people to make the decision of what type of library they want to have in their community. It's a critical path to sustainable funding. So what's been happening recently is that there's been a statewide task force formed to address this issue, made up of members of NYLA, the NYLA Legislative Committee, members from the Star Library, the Star Library's legal team, and other key system players throughout the state who also have libraries waiting in the wings that we're about to go for a special district legislation. So you don't normally see special district legislation, which is called a local bill, on the statewide New York Library Association legislative agenda. But there's a very good chance that this year you might see that and might be asked to speak up on behalf of a special district bill that seems to have nothing to do with the community you may live in. But this is why it's important for all of us to speak up, because what the governor's veto effectively did was crush democracy. The bill, all it does is authorize the people of the town to have a vote to decide whether or not they would like a special district. It doesn't automatically create the district, as the governor's comments seem to lead us all to believe in the wake of the veto. All it does is authorize the voters of a town to decide for themselves if they would like to have a special district library. So on behalf of the New York library community, NYLA is committed to standing up on behalf of special library district creation, and again is putting its resources behind the efforts of the Star Library and other libraries that are brave enough to put themselves back out there into this legislative season in the wake of the governor's veto. So as we said, this is an unprecedented situation and it's currently in motion, so we ask that you stay tuned. We're actually going to be using the NYLA website to keep everybody up to date on our efforts in this area. Currently you'll find a full page on NYLA's website describing the governor's veto and the information I just provided to you, and an impact statement of what that veto means to the entire library community. Once we have an actionable item, we're going to issue a call to action, hopefully, that helps everyone contribute to the effort to turn the situation around. Right now is not that time. We're currently working on an education campaign for the governor's staff and working with sponsoring legislators to figure out what the best path forward is. But trust us, when the time is right, we'll definitely let you know when it's time to speak up and stand up on behalf of the future of special district libraries. So now we're going to transition into talking about really actually getting the work done. We've given you some ammunition, we've given you talking points, we've helped you understand the why behind the what when you see the budget and legislative priorities on NYLA's website. But we also have to really work at delivering this message effectively. And that's really the work of the people just like you, the people who are on the front lines of the library community, who are going to be talking to their local legislators, both in your local community and in Albany, online and on the phone. So what we really wanted to drive home for you is how important numbers are. The volume of points of contact that we have with legislators really matters. We've heard multiple stories from multiple legislators and their aides. In fact, last week I was just in one of our assemblyman's offices, Assemblyman Kevin Cahill, and he totally admitted that his aides make a little mark on a piece of paper for every point of contact they have on an issue. And he mentioned he's been impressed with how much outreach our area has been giving to the issue of libraries. So they are paying attention. They are counting. Each point of contact matters. So we're going to talk through each of our opportunities for these points of contact. Now, Jeremy, I know you like to use the word inundate legislators with contact, but you also had an interesting point when we were talking yesterday about how you're hearing that some people are disheartened about some of the headlines coming out of Albany and wondering if our efforts really are going to have an impact this year.
Yeah, it's easy to think that the system in Albany is just broken and everything is for sale and there's no way to impact the lawmaking process, and I know that the library community is filled with a boundless optimism, and I truly believe that folks seek elected office and come to Albany for the right reasons, because they want to serve their communities. And I know we've seen a number that lose their way along the way during their service, but I think a majority of the folks that are here for the right reasons. And I can tell you, I've spoke to staffers just as Rebecca has, and they're making those tick marks. And a point worth making is that you think, oh, okay, there's some intern there who's just checking this off, and that's what they do, is they just make these tick marks all day. I've had staffers say, oh gosh, yeah, we've gotten so many contacts about your issue. This, gosh, you know, it's huge. And I'll go back and check our system and see that, oh yeah, they got 11 emails. It's not huge numbers for them to have their attention caught. For better or worse, the general disengagement in the legislative process by a vast majority of the population plays to our favor, because as a community, the library community is engaged and active and is willing to take action. And it doesn't take a tremendous number to catch the attention of the lawmakers. So don't ever feel like, oh, yeah, you know, it doesn't matter. It does matter. Every single action, every phone call, every email, it counts and it matters, and you're moving the needle, as they say.
A big part of advocacy is, again, educating legislators as to their constituents' interests. They'll actually be grateful to be hearing a large segment of the people they have been elected to serve care about a particular issue. So again, you're doing them a favor by educating them as to these issues, because we impact an awful lot of people in their districts. And that's a good point to bring up when you're in their office. How many people are cardholders? How many kids are in your classroom? How many people are coming through the doors of your educational institution and using the library and benefiting from that in the community that legislator is elected to serve? So I know we've got a lot of introverted people in the library community, but just remember, it's not about you. It's about the people you serve and the people they serve. And you're helping to connect those two people so they can do better on behalf of everyone in the community. So to help you do that, we have a little kind of to-do list for you to think about between now and when you're communicating with your legislators. I know a lot of you are coming to Library Advocacy Day next week on Wednesday, February 25th. You're going to be in Albany with Jeremy and I and having a good time, making a big difference, but also you can make a big difference from your seat by using the online advocacy, using your phone, and having visits with your legislators in their offices and at your libraries. But you've got to be prepared for those visits. I know some of us are good at winging it. I'm not one of those people. So I need to study up before we go and talk to people that can really affect change on behalf of our libraries. Just a few tips for you. You might add these to your to-do list if you haven't done them already. Be very familiar with the talking points on the New York Library Association's budget and legislative priorities. Again, they're right there at NYLA.org. Share them with your other library stakeholders in your organizations. Make sure they're familiar with them. The cool thing about libraries is we have all walks of life involved in our administration, governance, and our user base. And you never know who knows who. Many years ago, I was doing an advocacy workshop, and one of my trustees from a member library actually, when she finally understood how things worked in Albany, pointed out that the head of division of budget was actually a former student of hers, and she taught 4th grade math. And wouldn't you know, she still knew him and his mom. And could she be helpful by giving a call? And I said, absolutely. And she said, what should I say? And that's really sometimes where advocacy falls down, where you can figure out who to talk to, but what is it you're supposed to say? So practice. Figure out what the most effective message is for you. Those talking points are a great place to start. You've got people with a lot of advocacy experience. Help to craft those talking points to help you get your message across. It's a good combination of both heartwarming information and statistics, which is important because different types of people respond to different types of information. So switching it up with statistics and fact-based stuff, as well as the heartwarming anecdotes that we all need to bring to the table, can make you the most effective advocate possible. It's also good to do a little sleuthing or homework on your local legislators, your state senator and state assembly person. Not to be nefarious to find out what they're up to, but to find out what what their interests are. What types of bills have they been introducing? What events have they been at recently? Sometimes you'll find they have a very significant devotion to a particular cause. One of our legislators is his biggest issue that he cares most about is Veterans Affairs. So when we go to talk to him, we frame how what we do assists the group he's very concerned about and how services that we provide help what he would like to see happen in his community. That's the cool thing about libraries. We can reframe our issue to almost any topic because we have so much to offer our communities. So don't forget to gather key local statistics about your library. Again, our message is when you go in to talk to your legislator, they want to hear about local stories, local information. So know the impact that your library has. They might, be interested in a statewide trend, but they're most interested in the people they serve, their neighbors, what your library is doing for them. So be sure to have key statistics that'll knock their socks off. If you have any increases that are notable over the past few years, probably in some really key areas like programming, we're seeing particularly in public libraries, are seeing a big increase in program attendance, e-book usage. Make sure you're well versed in talking about the e-book issue. You'll no doubt get asked the question, really, you think libraries will be around? Or do you think books will last? Those are things that, again, you can't roll your eyes at or just kind of mumble through your answer or groan when someone asks you. It's an opportunity to educate someone as to how vibrant libraries are right now. And actually, it's a great time for libraries. It's an exciting time for libraries. And you should be able to convey that when you're talking to a legislator. Don't let them throw you off your game by asking one of those weird questions about the viability of libraries in the future. Invite them to be part of the trend, which is the popularity of libraries in New York State. We really want to stress the importance of anecdotes, the stories of the people that use your libraries. Always have one or two of those stories in your pocket. Because when Jeremy talked about making an impression and having an impact in your meetings or on a phone call with a legislator or a legislative aide, the stories are really what sticks for people. They can really remember the story. They might not be able to recall that statistic that you threw at them, but if you've got a story that drives home your point about someone who learned how to read as an adult at the library, or someone who got a job at the library, or a kid who's doing much better in school thanks to their school librarian, whatever your story might be, make it very personal and convey that. Don't be afraid to speak up and share that story. That's just as important or probably more important than some of the statistics we've thrown at you here today. We were joking yesterday, we were just going to encourage you, don't be afraid to go for the tearjerker. If you can make them cry, that's pretty memorable, right? Crying and laughter is very memorable. Hope no one's crying right now in this webinar. Okay. So when we look at your opportunities, your points of contact with your legislators, we've mentioned a couple times you can come to Albany with us next Wednesday, have a good time. You've got hundreds of library advocates converging onto Albany all at the same time, sharing the same message with excitement about the future of libraries. These are just a couple of pictures from our experience here at the Mid-Hudson Library System with our legislators and the meetings that we go to. Your meetings will all have a leader in them. You should check with your local library system to find out your schedule for meetings. You'll get into this meeting, you might not recognize everyone in the room, but hopefully you'll know who your system person is in that room, and look to them to kick off the meeting. They'll help set the stage and set the tone, cover the major talking points, and then provide room for you, the grassroots library advocate, to speak up with your local stories about how state aid has an impact locally. It might be talking about how your system supports your library, how one of those local aid programs has really impacted the people of your community. That's your time to speak up face-to-face with your legislator or their aide, whoever you might be speaking with. And Jeremy, you've always pointed out, since we don't always meet with the legislators, some constituents get disappointed about that, but it's not always a bad thing.
No, not at all. It's and I will admit that I too get a little starstruck. It's very exciting to get to meet with your elected officials directly, and I would certainly be excited to be in the room with Governor Cuomo. I can't say that I've had the opportunity to shake his hand. So it's definitely part of the process, and it's exciting to get and come and see the guy that you see in the paper or see on the news on occasion. But as far as most effectively delivering the message and making sure that the issues that we're seeking to address are heard, you are truthfully often better off meeting with their legislative director or their chief of staff than the member themselves, because when they're here in Albany, they are on a very tight schedule. They have committee meetings, and they are on the floor, participating in sessions, so their minds are very fractured while they're here, and they have staff, and the staff's job is to meet with their constituents and gather information on all of the issues, and to bring that back. And it's almost Rebecca and I joked it's cutting out the middleman, because if you do meet with your member and you're going to hand them your folder of materials and make your talking points and leave them with a memorable story, they're going to hand that folder off to their legislative director and say, look through this and tell me what I need to know. And so if you're meeting with the legislative director directly, you're handing them the folder, making sure you're pointing out the key points in the materials, and then they're going to take that back to the member anyhow. So don't be disheartened if you're meeting with someone other than your elected representative.
So I've always wanted to do this. I would like you guys to use the raise your hand feature if you've been to Advocacy Day before with the New York Library Association. Cool. So I bet a lot of you have tips that you could share of how to make the day go smoothly. It's an exciting day, but it takes a lot of energy to get through it. And these are some top tips. If you've got some tips to add to it, please do so in the chat box. That'd be cool to share what you've learned over the years of what works and what doesn't. These are just a few things we wanted to give you a heads up on, particularly if you've never been to Advocacy Day before. You might not realize you have to go through a security checkpoint, and we'll have to empty out your pockets and good stuff like that. So no pocket knives or sharp sticks. If you're bringing a big sign for the rally, they won't let the stick through the security checkpoint. It's a good little tip for you to not carry that up with you. So just prepare for that. Don't be thrown off by that. Again, look for your systems rep. They can help you get through the day, particularly when they're in your meetings with you. They'll make things go well for you in that meeting. Again, we want you to don't be shy, speak up. We want to pack those offices with people, but if it's quiet in the office, if we're just hearing crickets, that's not very effective. So someone's got to step up and speak up, and it might just be you. You might be that perfect person to do so, so don't be shy. Jeremy's organized a very cool event in something that's called the Well of the Legislative Office Building. You might be kind of trying to picture what the Well is. Imagine a great grand lobby of the Legislative Office Building. So when you arrive in the morning in Albany, you're going to be headed towards NYLA Base Camp, which is in Legislative Office Building, or LOB 120. You're going to pass through what's called the Well, which is where hundreds of library advocates are going to be gathering at noon to make some noise on behalf of the library's legislative agenda. When you're in your meetings, make some time to get your photo taken with legislators. It's great to be using that on your social media outlets and channels to show people that you're actively advocating for funds for libraries. And your legislators like to have the photo opportunity as well, so they can be sharing what they've been thinking about and working on behalf of their constituents. And take the opportunity while you've got FaceTime with the legislator or their chief of staff to invite the legislator to your library. Figure out the best way to make that happen, whether it's just for a tour, for maybe reading to kids. I think we see that a lot in our system. We just had one of our libraries, the Chatham Library, did the Wild Rumpus read with Where the Wild Things Are, and 2 of our legislators showed up to help out with that, which made for, again, some great photo ops for both them and for the library. Again, if you meet with your legislator's aide or staff person or even an intern, ask for their business card before you leave the room. So when you follow up and write your thank you letter to the aide and to the legislator, you can mention the person you met with by name. That goes a long way with the person that you met with and makes the legislator feel good about his staff and the job the staff is doing on their behalf. Jeremy, anything else you want to talk about? Advocacy Day tips? Anything that I missed that you think is important for people to know?
Well, I suppose one little thing, you did already mention the airport, like security. You will pass through security as you leave the concourse and try to enter into the secure portion, which is the Capitol building and the Legislative Office building. And you can move between the Capitol and the Legislative Office building without leaving security. You're still inside the security perimeter, which is handy if you happen to have a meeting in the Capitol building and then another meeting in the Legislative Office building. One tip is that the cafeteria that's available in the concourse is outside of security. So if you are needing to go out and grab some lunch, just build in extra time because you're going to have to come back through that security checkpoint. And I, particularly during advocacy season that we're in the height of, it can take up to a half an hour to get through security. So just be aware of that.
So we know that not everyone can join us on Advocacy Day, but there's plenty that you can be doing from your library or from your home. You have an opportunity to be calling your legislators' offices. Calling the local office is always a great idea to connect with local staff, but we ask for your help if you're not able to come with us, or to encourage your peers or your patrons who can't be there to call on Advocacy Day to the Albany office. I have to tell you, as someone who attends Advocacy Day every year, it's pretty cool to walk into my office that I have my meeting in, and to have the staff go, my God, the phone's been ringing off the hook today with library people. You're a library person too? So help the people that are up in Albany advocating for libraries by calling on Advocacy Day if you're not going to be at Albany with us. And Jeremy, I understand your new CapWiz software from NYLA is going to be helpful with phone calls this year. Is that right?
That's right. We will be making this available for next Wednesday, and similar to the actions that you may have taken already where you can send a letter, you'll be able to log in, put in your address, and the system will pull up the phone numbers of your elected representatives and provide you a little box with a script. So you can just pick up the phone, dial the numbers, read the script, and you're good to go.
Cool. And of course, we've got the Online Advocacy Center, which is new and improved this year. It's new and shiny. I like it very much. Jeremy launched the new message about 2 weeks ago, and I bet a bunch of you have already sent your messages. If you haven't, get on that. What are you waiting for? And I hope you're really encouraging other people to use this interface. It's incredibly easy, as many of you know, to send the message. Jeremy even wrote it for you. You have no excuse not to be doing this. Cool. It's even cool because you can customize it with some local information. If you would like to add in things about your particular library, you can do that and take a little more than 2 minutes if you wanted to. But this is really critical to make sure everyone in your library has used this interface to get the word out. I mistakenly asked Jeremy for the spreadsheet to see how many of my area library supporters were using the online advocacy interface, and he's always buttered me up telling me Mid-Hudson does a great job getting the word out. But when I saw the actual numbers, I was a little disappointed. So I've actually challenged my members this year. I want every single one of my libraries to find at least 21 people to speak up for 21st library services, 21st century library services. So maybe challenge your library, yourself, your system. How many people can you encourage to use the Online Advocacy Center? Sometimes challenging people or pitting libraries against each other can up the number of people that are going to use the interface to reach out and speak up to legislators. Email is actually effective. Again, they're counting how many emails as well as phone calls and letters are coming in on issues. So using the online format, it is working. We're hearing that from legislators. They are watching. They are listening. Don't forget, you've got, oh, Jeremy, we're going to jump in there? Sorry.
No. I was, I was going to just say that the tool is there, it's available, and as Rebecca had said, the numbers are solid, but we could do far better. The Division of Library Development tells us that there's about 25,000 people just employed by libraries, which is many of you on the call, although I know we do have some trustees on the line as well. And at best case, we had, on our best action last year, we had about 2,500 people take action. So we're not even getting 10% of the people whose livelihood is directly related to this issue, and that doesn't even begin to address the 10 million plus library card holders. So we are just scratching the surface. And because of the evolution of social media, so many of you now have a platform to promote this. Put the link out, and through Twitter and through Facebook, we have a hashtag, which is NYLA, Library Advocacy Day 15. So tweet about it. We have some canned tweets available if you're not sure how to get the right messaging together in that brief 140 characters. And I know that when NYLA puts up the link and says, here's the link to write to your elected representative, don't just do it and don't just like it, but share it. Share it on your wall, and encourage others to share it on their walls. The more places, the more exposure that we can get to that, we really could begin to start to engage that 10 million number in a far more effective way.
Here in the Mid-Hudson Library System, we encourage our libraries, and they do a great job of following through, of adding a link to their homepage of their website, using the social media channels, primarily of Facebook and Twitter, to get the word out to their patrons, their user base, about the need to use the Online Advocacy Center. But don't forget to also be checking out your legislators' social media channels. Check out their Facebook page, their Twitter feed. Tag your legislators in your tweets about the library's need for increased state aid. That's how you get in their face, in their channel, so they're seeing what has to be done on behalf of libraries to make us viable as we move into the future. So NYLA's made things extremely easy for us all. They have a whole virtual advocacy page on their website. When you go to nyla.org/advocacy, one of the options you'll see is the virtual advocacy page. You've got graphics you can use, the links you should be pointing people towards. They've even crafted the tweets for you, so you don't have to count the 140 characters out. Just copy and paste stuff like this right into your channels and use them to direct your patrons, your users, towards the Online Advocacy Center. So if you haven't gotten the message yet, now is a good time to be doing a lot of this stuff. When we think about the importance of this timing that we've got going on, as Jeremy mentioned, some of the budget hearings are already taking place and conversations are already happening. When we were at the Assemblyman Kevin Cahill's office last week, he was telling us in his caucus they've already discussed library aid and what to do. One of our senators already told us he wrote a letter on behalf of full funding for libraries. So now is the time to strike. Those conversations are going on now. There's no reason to wait. So please motivate your base of support wherever you have influence. It might be in your library with your patrons, maybe your family. You just twist their arms and get them to send a couple of messages to the Online Advocacy Center. Make it your business to increase the number of people that are having points of contact with their legislators on the issues we've discussed here today. As we've referred to a number of times here, NYLA's done an awesome job of giving you everything you need to be a successful advocate for state funding and for the legislative priorities we're all concerned about as a library community. What you might not realize is there's some great stuff that's been saved year after year, best practice stuff, right? We're so good at that as libraries, as borrowing from each other what works best. So not only do you have these active advocacy issues that we're pointing you to now, like the Advocacy Center to send your messages, we've also got little tips for when you're meeting with your legislators, or a templated thank you letter for the day after Advocacy Day, or when you have a local meeting with your legislator to say thank you and follow up and make sure they heard your issues. So there's all sorts of goodies at nyla.org/advocacy for us all to be using to get the word out. So when we take a look at the impact that we're having, I hope we've made it clear today that you as an individual have a big impact. But imagine the work we can be doing if we're spreading and inspiring other people to do the same things that we're all committed to doing. That's really what it takes, is to inspire other people to speak up on behalf of libraries and remind them that it's not just about them or their neighbor. We're talking about our communities and how sustainable they are for the future. Libraries play a huge role in building sustainable communities, and we need the government's help to subsidize some of the funding that we need to make library services affordable for people in our local communities. So again, you can make a big difference, and everyone should be giving it their best shot. We're not all the most awesome public speakers. Some of us have to practice at that, like I do, but we all can make a difference just by making a little bit of effort, either in person, online, through the phone, with a letter. There's always something you can do to have an impact. So before we start and open up to questions, we just wanted to take a minute to thank you so much for stepping up as a library advocate. This doesn't work without people like you who care enough to protect the institution that's a cornerstone of democracy, not only in New York, but throughout the world. So we thank you for standing up on these issues related to funding and our legislative priorities, but just for libraries in general. It's so critical these days that we get the word out about the essential nature of libraries, the important work we do, the good return on investment we are. And if we're well versed in that, that's really important, because if we're not willing to step up and speak up on behalf of libraries, nobody else is going to do it for us. But we can inspire other people to do it if we take that first step. So thanks for taking the time this morning to be with us, to listen to all the ins and outs of the budget priorities and the legislative priorities. We absolutely appreciate your time.
Here, I absolutely echo all of Rebecca's comments, and I would also like to thank Rebecca for her tremendous efforts in being one of the lead advocates in the library community and all the work that she does to help us get the word out. So thanks to you all, and thanks to Rebecca. And with that, what I'm going to do is end this recording. For those who were on the line, we'll answer the questions we have in the queue. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to just click the recording off.